Well, today's webinar is Introduction to Ayurvedic Medicine. Our speakers are Sharanya Gitanjali Chakraborty, and she's a certified Ayurveda clinical specialist and an associate faculty member at Vedica Global, where she teaches about Ayurvedic pharmacology. She is also the chief Ayurveda consultant at the India Community Center's Ayurveda Wellness Clinic. Sharanya holds a master's degree in biochemistry from Georgetown University and spent 5 years in molecular biology research at Georgetown and Stanford universities. She has spoken at the Health Technology Forum, Women's Healing Conference, and for seniors in Silicon Valley. She feels privileged to combine her Ayurvedic education and background in biochemistry to help ignite healing journeys for others. We also have Ananta Ripa Ajmera. She's a Shivananda certified yoga teacher, a Vedica Global certified Ayurveda health practitioner, and a Vedica Global associate faculty member, where she teaches yoga and Ayurveda fundamentals. Ananta has taught at juvenile detention centers, schools, nonprofits, and shelters in San Francisco Bay Area, New York City, and India. She graduated with honors in marketing from NYU Stern Business School. She writes for mindbodygreen.com and elephantjournal.com, where her articles are frequently featured in Popular Lately staff picks, Featured Today highlight, and top 10 blogs of the week. She has spoken at Columbia Business School and the National Ayurvedic Medical Association, UC Berkeley, NYU, Wharton Business School, and the Lifestyles of Health and Sustainability, or LOHAS conference. Ladies, I really look forward to your webinar today. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Jerry. I am Sharanya Gitanjali Chakraborty.
And I am Ananta Ripa Ajmera. We're so happy to be here with you.
I was introduced to Ayurveda in India, where I was born and raised. But I didn't quite experience it until I had my own health challenge after coming to the United States and finding what the root cause of the problem was. It is a great privilege today to introduce Ayurvedic medicine to you at the Stanford community and bringing the 5,000-year-old medical system from India. This science was actually started by ancient rishis who were sages, and they did the research in nature and did analysis. And we are going to present some tidbits from that today to you. Let's begin the Ayurvedic journey today. Ayurveda literally translates into 2 words. It breaks down to Ayush, meaning life, and Veda, meaning science, which equals to Ayurveda being the science of life. You've all probably experienced some of the yoga classes and meditation, and in the past decades, these two have been established sciences. And it might come as a surprise to you that this actually is part of Ayurveda. So Ayurveda lifestyle living actually includes yoga and meditation. So if you've already been doing yoga practices and meditation, you're already living an Ayurvedic lifestyle in a little way without knowing it. This is an image of Rishi Sushruth, which I was just telling you about, that rishis were sages, and in those times they had matted hair and they looked very different from the current time people. And the fundamental principle on which Ayurveda is based is this, that when diet is wrong, medicine is of no use. And when diet is right, medicine is of no need. And not far from that, Hippocrates said something similar, who is the father of medicine, that let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. But in today's time, we have advanced a lot in technology with modern medicine, and food has become a different department. So there is nutrition and there is dietitians, but it's not quite integrated within the system as one whole body. All right, let's dive a little bit deeper into the history of Ayurveda with Ananta.
Thank you so much, Aranya. So I actually did not know about Ayurveda for a long time, even though I grew up Indian. I grew up in the US, and when I was in business school, I encountered a lot of health challenges that I was seeking a solution to, and was so happy to discover this science right in my culture of origin as well as my family of origin. So coming to Ayurveda has really been a great journey back home and back to a space of really being able to take health into my own hands. So I'm so happy to be here with Sharanya to be able to share this with you. Did you know that one of the leading proponents of Ayurvedic medicine was actually considered the grandfather of modern surgery? Rishi Sushruta, who was around between the period of 1200 to 600 BCE, was actually the first person to document the most ancient document on surgery, which is called the Sushruta Samhita. This text was compiled well before the Corpus Hippocraticum, which was written between the 5th to 4th centuries BCE. And the painting that you see here was actually created during a mission that an illustrator named Robert Thom was commissioned on by a pharmaceutical company to depict the history of world medicine through a series of paintings. In that journey, he discovered Ayurveda as being really one of the oldest systems of medicine in the world. And even though Ayurveda is so well researched and well documented, and we can see that on the next slide, one example of this research and documentation in the Charaka Samhita, which is a foundational Ayurvedic treatise covering epistemology, diagnosis, therapy development, and implementation. What happened? Why did we not know about this? How could I have grown up as an Indian person without even knowing that this science actually exists in my culture and even family of origin? Well, for many years, India, as we know, was under colonial rule as well as the rule of Mughal invaders to the subcontinent. At that time, Ayurveda was nearly wiped out because it was banned from existence. No one could really safely practice the science under the rulers of the country. As a result, there were still a few brave souls who really believed in the science and were going to do what it took to continue to practice it because it delivered results for them, and it continues to deliver those same results today. And so it has actually withstood the test of not only time, but also colonization in order to come to us today in this form. So we feel extremely lucky to have been able to connect with this, to heal from it, and now to be able to share this historical treasure from ancient civilization with you today. So now Sharanya will take us into some of the great building blocks of the science of Ayurveda.
Thank you, Ananta. Before I go into the deeper concepts, I wanted to add that I grew up in India. I was born and raised there, and I was introduced to Ayurveda pretty early on, but I didn't actually experience the healing power until I came to the United States. So after I went through my own health challenge while I was working at Stanford 5 years ago, and then trying different healthcare systems, including the conventional medicine, that's when I decided to finally explore Ayurveda. And it so happened that when I went to this practitioner and with the deep questioning process, she actually uncovered something which was more deep-rooted and which I never thought was an issue. And that whole diagnosis process was so fascinating to me that I wanted to explore more into this science. And 5 years ago is when I started my journey, and I'm so excited that I'm able to translate some of those beautiful principles to you today, and hope you enjoy the journey that I'm about to take you on. Ayurveda takes a whole systems approach to health. What is so special about Ayurveda? Let's talk about that. That when you're taking the whole systems approach, it is where the macrocosm and the microcosm are both united. And in order to understand the working inside you, you can take inspiration from outside of you. Because it is the same set of building blocks of nature that work outside, and they are somewhat connected to you inside. That's the biggest idea of Ayurveda. It doesn't draw a boundary to a single organ, and it's not just the body. It's a whole system. It's an ecosystem. So you're living within an ecosystem. Now let's understand how this ecosystem works, and let's go deeper. So in macrocosm, when you think about it, there are 5 different elements, and you're probably all familiar with it. There is space, there is air, fire, water, and earth. And how do these interact? So let's look at it in a more deeper way as to what these concepts mean in your body. So we'll start with applying these elements in your life in terms of food, the foods that you know. When you look at this image in your chat window, can you type in a predominant element that comes? And actually, before you do that, let me give you a little more about the 5 elements. That every substance in the nature contains 5 elements, right from the stuff that you eat and the stuff that you eliminate and the stuff that you see. So everything is 5 elements, but they are all predominant in something. So the 5 elements that we just saw in the previous slide, the air, space, fire, earth, and water, this particular image of a red chili is predominant in one element and the other 4 follow. So let's work with it and see that what you think of intuitively that this chili is representing.
Okay. Are you typing in your answers? What do you think it is? I'm not able to. Oh, interesting. Well, let's reveal it, and I will see what is happening.
All right. If you thought it was fire, then it is right, because the red chili, the first thing that you taste in your mouth is the fire element, but it still has space, air, water, and earth in it.
Okay, go ahead.
Let's look at the next one. What do you think this is predominant in of all the 5 elements?
I'm not getting. Yeah, we'll have to do it without.
That's fine. We'll give it maybe, okay. It's water. So when you think of these fruits or vegetables that I'm showing you, what you want to imagine is that the first bite that you take in your mouth, what is it that you experience? And a red chili is always fiery. A grape will always release some water in your mouth, so it is water predominant. And then popcorns. And this might not be a direct guess, and we're talking about the popcorn without all the butter in it. So this is just the dry version, and if you thought it was air and space, then you got it right, because this is very light. It will, and when we say air and space, it doesn't mean light in the sense of it won't fill you up. It will still fill you up, but it has a predominant quality from within the nature. Going further, this should be an easy one, and since we're not able to somehow coordinate the answers, but we're just, we're connecting at a much deeper intuitive level, so we'll take it like that. Mm-hmm. And this is, the picture was represented as the carrots in earth, and this element is predominant in earth because all root vegetables are earth predominant. Now, okay, now we've learned about these 5 different vegetables and the 5 different elements, but what does it even mean? Does it mean anything? So each human being has these 5 elements, and what becomes your unique signature is that you have your 5 elements in a certain order, whereas the other person has it in different order. So one size does not fit all. So just because you still might, 2 people might experience biting a chili and feeling the heat, but how it will metabolize in your body would be completely different based on how the 5 elements are structured in your system. And so this picture was actually perfect to show that the one size just does not fit all. And to actually now going further, let's do the first poll. And do they have the poll question?
Yeah. Okay, so let's get that. Oh, gosh. The control is, okay. So the control is not there. It keeps popping in and out. Wow, it's very interesting. Okay. Wow. Okay. I am so sorry. This was working when we tested it, but not now. So can we go through?
Yeah. Absolutely. So the poll question was that, do you know people who feel colder and warmer when others don't? So like, let's say you're in a meeting room and it's a warm day, but there is air conditioning on, and somebody might be wearing a sleeveless shirt, whereas the other person might be wearing a sweater. And we don't really pay attention to that because we kind of take it for granted that, oh, our bodies are different. But what is working here is the 5 elements and how they're playing out. That perhaps at that point, the fire is more predominant in that being where he's sweating, the image on your left, and the guy on the right, he's feeling cold. He might even be freezing, even though it's a warm day outside, just how those 5 elements are playing out in him. So let's look at the other poll. And this is, again, it's an interesting example where we talk about foods. You know, you go to a restaurant, and this, I wanted to show me and my husband in this image, but I didn't do that. I didn't go that far. But it usually happens, we'll go to a restaurant, and the food that I and my daughter eat, we're totally fine and we enjoy it, but my husband would always fall sick. And this happens in a particular restaurant. And it's fascinating to see that because the food wasn't bad, there was nothing wrong with it, but we just reacted differently because our bodies are completely different. And that's what the teaching point is here, that you want to understand how all our bodies are differently built, and what do you do when you're in situations like this. And there is not much to do here. I mean, you wouldn't stop eating out, but what you would do, okay, can they see it? So
I think so, yes.
Okay, great.
Yes. Okay.
So
okay.
I want to go to the next slide. So now let's align this with identifying a constitution in your body. And the pictures that we have used going forward are all illustrations, and more for you to understand how this concept is applied in the animal kingdom, and so you can get a better sense of it. You can see, so this is an image of a lion here. And what comes to your mind that this is predominant in? And if you think it's fire, you're right. Because when we think of lion's roar, we always remember the fiery, energetic, and the enthusiasm and the anger that lion represents. So that's what is going on here. Then going to a deer. So a deer represents something very light, running around, and fun-loving, enthusiastic animal. And you also associate it with lightness because it feels like a free, fast-running animal. And if you think that this is predominant in air and space, then you got that right, because the lightness, like we talked about earlier in popcorn, it's something similar that is going on in a deer. And what does elephant represent to you, Jay?
Elephant means
from the 5 elements.
Right. Earth.
That's right. Perfect. So you see how the intuition is really applied here, where you look at an animal and you have something that it reminds you of. So we have a fish. You're a perfect audience here, Jay.
Yeah.
So let's take you through the fish. What does this represent out of the 5 elements?
I would guess water.
That's right again. So it's water. So, and again, these illustrations, like I was saying, is to really show you what each of this might be predominant in. But we're not talking about, so if we're looking at a fish, it's not just water. It is still water, space, air, fire, and earth. But all of those are in different proportions in the body. So let's look at the next principle. And this is again a very interesting concept in Ayurveda, which is light increases life. And it might not make sense, but when I take you through the next few slides, it will become a little more clear. Okay, so let's say a lion. We know that lion is fiery constitution, and if he eats a fire-dominated food, what will happen? Any thoughts, Jerry?
More intensity, more intensity of his reaction.
Right, and it will increase heat because the light increases light, and that's what we're trying to represent here. And it can manifest as heartburn, anger, controlling behavior. So that's what happens, that if you're a fiery dominant person and you're eating fiery foods, and if we can translate that into a human example, it would be that you generally feel very hot and you're eating Mexican food with the extra chili, then there might be consequences to the person who's receiving you.
Mm-hmm.
Now the next example. So if he's eaten fiery food, what happens? What do we do about it? I mean, do we just leave it at that? No, we don't. So we first understand that our constitution is fiery, and then we try to oppose it by different things. So we're trying to extinguish the fire in the system. So we introduce the lion to grace, and that would make him more balanced and calmer. Let's look at air and space constitution. So the deer, which we concluded that is air and space dominant, and let's say if he eats the air and space dominant foods like popcorn, any guesses what might happen?
Confusion or less focus?
That's right. So air and space in the body would also represent both physically and mentally. So in case of the physical, it would represent more in the sense of pain in the body or anxiety. But in terms of mind, it means spaced out. So if you experience being spaced out on a normal basis, then you don't want to eat the light and space or air increasing foods. And what would the deer do instead? The deer would have to eat something more balancing, which is right opposite. The air and space is spacing out, so what that would be countered with is grounding food. So if the deer was eating earth-predominant foods, then it would feel more balanced.
Makes sense.
Now let's look at the earthy constitution of an elephant. If the elephant was eating more earth-dominant foods, or somebody earthy constitution eating more heavier foods. So when we look at earth-dominated, we're really looking at heavier foods. Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
He would feel more sluggish, he would feel more heavy, and then there is dullness in the body. And mentally, it would be more stubbornness because he is just stuck wherever and he doesn't want to move. And to counter that, the earthy constitution, and we'll apply the previous principle, that now we want to give them air and space dominated food. All right. So the elephant, if he eats popcorn, he would feel more balanced because he's already heavy. He wants to bring some lightness, so he becomes more mobile. So what does all of this mean? We're really trying to find the balance in the body. And the same way, when we look at a watery constitution animal, like a fish, and eating water-dominated foods, let's see what that would do in the body. That would increase the water element. Of course, the person or the fish would feel more cold. There is water retention in the body. And mentally, it leads to being overly emotional. So the person continuously cries, right? So the fish would be in the crying mode. So, and to balance that, we want to counter the too much watery with fire. So here is that opposing quality. So we'll give the fish red chili, which will make the fish more balanced. And this is really to translate that, somebody who has that coldness within their body, if they were eating warm cooked foods, it would just make them feel more balanced and more healthy. So the focus of Ayurveda, like I was saying a little bit earlier, is on balance. It's a mature science, And whenever people ask us in the clinic that is this food good for me or it's not, I mean, the purpose of showing the previous slides was really to give you a sense of how each predominant food and how predominant animal interact, but it's never like this is the way, because, again, going back to it, that nobody has just one element only. They have all five. So the answer is never yes or no for any kind of food or any kind of activity. It always is, it depends. And that's what I absolutely love about Ayurveda, that it never says no to you for any kind of food, but it will always say either in moderation or it depends, or you need to go on a break for a little bit time and then you come back to it. Moving further along, let's take another poll. And this is a very interesting one, that a lot of times people get confused about Ayurvedic diet. They either think the answers are, there are three questions given to you, that they either think that it's synonymous with Indian cuisine, or B, vegetarian, or C, if it's healthy, it should not be tasty. And since the poll is not working really, we'll ask Jerry, what do you think?
Okay. Vegetarian, B.
And you could choose all three if you wanted.
Oh, okay. So it's synonymous with Indian. Synonymous with Indian cuisine, right. And I know that Indian cuisine is very tasty.
Okay.
Okay, so I know it's not C.
Great. So these are all myths, actually. So first of all, Ayurvedic diet is not vegetarian. It has, and it's funny, it has all kinds of meats that you probably would have never eaten. It talks about snake, pigeon, peacock, even sheep, for instance. Sheep is common, but, cow, there is all kinds of animals. And depending on what your body needs, all of them have medicinal quality, and they would be introduced in your diet when needed. And it's definitely not synonymous with Indian cuisine. Because when you go to a restaurant, a lot of times the most popular food here is the chicken tikka masala or the paneer tikka masala in the vegetarian opposite. And that is totally non-Ayurvedic and incompatible and harmful for you. The reason being that it violates the fundamental principle of non-compatible food, of how it is prepared. So the next time you're eating chicken tikka masala, think how much damage it is doing to your system. And the C, I don't know if people would choose that at all, but this is a very common thing that I experience in my clinic, that, some people would come and say that I'm on juicing and I've been doing that for 2 years now, just drinking raw smoothies. And my first question to them is, do you find it tasty? Is it delicious? And they're like, it's not supposed to be delicious. It's just doing its thing. And from the Ayurvedic perspective, the principle is that first, the food should be appetizing. Second, it should be pleasing to the heart. Third, it should be delicious. So if none of these meet, that means you're harming your system. So with that, I actually pass it on to Ananta to take you deeper into more concepts and how really Ayurveda can be applied in your life.
Thank you, Saranya. This is wonderful. So, moving into the goal of Ayurveda, it is actually to help maintain the health of an individual and to help the diseased person to become healthy again. So this is a very amazing thing, actually, to Ayurveda, that the first part of this two-pronged scope of the science is to actually prevent health problems. We have a whole sub-science, a whole sub-branch of Ayurveda, which is just dedicated to health promotion and health improvement. So we're actually going to learn some of that in just a moment here. As Sharanya was sharing earlier, the key to health in Ayurveda is really balance. We are trying to come back to a state of homeostasis within the mind and body in a variety of different ways. So we will now move on to the next slide, which will actually show you a lot of the different areas that Ayurveda has been effective in. So this homeostasis, this critical balance within us that is the key to good health, can go out due to a variety of reasons in life. One being, when a woman becomes pregnant, when there's aging going on, when there's a need for ENT-related issues. All of this can cause us to really need something to help us come back to that state of balance. It's particularly interesting to note that Ayurveda not only provides a woman with care during pregnancy as well as afterwards, but actually for 6 months prior to even conceiving a child. We actually work with a person, a woman, to prepare her mind and body for the process of pregnancy by becoming as healthy, as possible in that particular way beforehand, which will actually ensure that, she's able to prevent a lot of the complications that can come up with pregnancy. It goes beyond that to even address any kind of women's reproductive issues. I know I personally have struggled a lot with really painful menstrual cycles for so many years. I just thought, it's just something I took for granted. Everyone has pain when they're on their period. But actually, in coming to Ayurveda, I learned that you don't have to. There are actually things that you can do to go ahead and prevent that. Same thing with aging, right? We're all looking for that anti-aging pill, the cream, the lotion, the potion, spending tons of money on it, when actually you can make your own potions and your own creams and your own substances right from your own kitchen. So that's a really exciting thing about Ayurveda. The rishis who Sharanya was talking about earlier actually have done their research and experimentation in nature. And so now we're actually going to share with you the conclusions of that research. There are a lot of herbal medicines in Ayurveda, and actually nowadays people mostly know about the herbs and the medicines that Ayurveda has to offer, even in the field of Ayurveda. But what we have learned from our school, and which we feel personally transformed by, is this first line of defense that we find in our everyday food and lifestyle. As we learned earlier, when diet is right, medicine is of no use. And if your diet is not right, then medicine is of no use. And if your diet is right, then actually medicine isn't of any use. So that's a really amazing aspect to Ayurveda, which we will now go ahead and explore. In our humble kitchen, which we utilize as our first line of defense in Ayurveda for really having health prevention and for optimizing our health, really promoting health. So the first spice that we will explore is cardamom. And cardamom is what is responsible for actually making the sweets that you eat sweet. So it's used for a lot of pastries and cookies and cakes and things like that. It is a really wonderful spice that you can even chew 1 to 2 pods of and spit out instead of using Altoids. So the next time, you're in a grocery store and you're ready to buy the Altoids for $5, you can actually just use the cardamom in your kitchen cabinet instead. And this will also help you in case you're dealing with any nausea-related symptoms. Just chewing 1 or 2 of these green cardamom pods directly is an amazing solution right there in your pocket. The next spice we have is turmeric. And turmeric is an amazing, amazing spice. There's actually pages and pages of the benefits of turmeric in our ancient Ayurvedic texts. There's been a lot of recent research done on turmeric these days as well. One of the very interesting and very fascinating things about turmeric is that in India, there is one Band-Aid company that has actually infused their Band-Aids with turmeric because of its powerful wound healing antiseptic properties. So even if you don't have the turmeric-infused Band-Aids, you can actually go ahead and speed up your healing process anytime you have a wound or a cut by applying a little bit of turmeric onto it, and then you can go ahead and put your Band-Aid on over it, which will go ahead and expedite that healing power. Another great use of turmeric is just right there in your food. A pinch of turmeric kills the the germs in your food. It has been proven to improve cognitive function in patients with Alzheimer's disease, and it's just a great immunity building herb and spice that we like to have as much as we can in all of our Ayurvedic recipes and cooking. One important thing to keep in mind as we're talking about turmeric and really about any of these spices is the amount that we're using is very important. It's a very key concept here that just because it's really good for you does not mean you should add more of it. It's not that the more you add, the more you'll benefit. Actually, it has the opposite. The more you add, then potentially the less you could benefit. So just a pinch, in this case, would be what you would want to add to your food. Turmeric is also an amazing beauty ingredient. There are so many different beauty recipes that are made out of turmeric, and the photograph that you see here is actually a ritual that's done during all of the traditional Indian weddings. When a bride is getting ready for her big day, she will actually have all of her female relatives put on a turmeric paste made out of either fresh ground turmeric root or turmeric powder that's mixed with water or milk. And, you just leave it on for a while. It becomes like a mask, so you can kind of have trouble moving your face. And then okay, you can go ahead and clean this off and, rinse it off. And it's just a really fun thing to try right there in your home. It's a really fun festival of sorts that we have in the Indian culture too. Next, we'll move on to cumin seeds. So cumin seeds are another must-have ingredient in all of our Ayurvedic savory dishes. We really like using this spice because it has such a great benefit for the digestion. You can add it to your food as you're cooking. You can also just use it as a table spice by roasting some cumin seed powder and then, adding it to your food to really stimulate your digestion. The next spice that we will explore is called bishop's weed. It's also known as ajwain. So you'll see that spelling on the slide, Ajwain. If you're going to an Indian store where you can find this one for sure, then this is the name that you would give them. And this has been personally such an amazing life-saving spice for me during the menstrual cycle. I will just take 1/4 of a teaspoon of ajwain boiled in water and then sip it as tea. I was amazed, actually, just how quickly it acts to relieve all of the pain that I thought I had to experience. I never knew that right there in my mother's spice jar was a solution to this particular problem that I had for so long. I was taking Motrin and Tylenol and Advil and every single thing, and it would take a long time to kick in. But, there's nothing quite like this relief that I would get just from the ajwain. Another powerful benefit to ajwain is that you can use it to stimulate your appetite and also relieve gas and bloating. So we've had a lot of clients come in who've been really suffering from their food. Every time they eat, they just feel, like a balloon afterwards. And so we recommend them to just add 1/4 of a teaspoon of this roasted ajwain powder. You can either put it in your food and cook with it, or you can add it to food. You can also take the powder and mix it with warm water and drink it either small sips during your meal or a little bit afterwards. You can just sip this to prevent having that bloating and gas. And people are also amazed by how quickly and powerfully this counteracts their symptoms. One contraindication that's important to mention here is that we don't want to use this spice if we're having too much of the fire element out of balance in the body. So if you're having heartburn or, heat rashes or things of this nature, then you may not want to try this one. The best way to know that is, to see a practitioner, but in general, we want to give this as a contraindication. So you're aware of it. And now we'll explore the wonderful healing powers of nutmeg. Nutmeg is a really amazing tranquilizer which helps you to sleep at night. So I had one client who has a young child who wasn't able to sleep at all for a very long time. And you know how it is when you have children, if they don't sleep, then the parents don't get to sleep. And so this was really taking quite a toll on the whole family. I told her to use just a little bit of nutmeg, and you can see actually on the next slide what this recipe is. Just take a pinch of freshly grated nutmeg to add to warm milk at night before going to sleep. I can actually sleep like a baby. She was quite astounded by how this impacted her daughter, because she had tried so many different modalities and so many different sleeping medicines and, you know, you name it, she had tried it. But just this simple solution actually really worked wonders for her child, and then as a result, she was able to sleep better at night. And it's just really a wonderful spice in that sense. It also has an additional benefit of positively impacting the psychological aspect of the mind. So if you're having a lot of stress-related issues or, you know, any insomnia, then having this nutmeg will be really beneficial. Because it has this quality to allow you to sleep better at night, you may not want to have it in your morning milk, just as a caveat, because you will start to feel that sleepiness kicking in during the day. Another contraindication that we wanted to mention is not to use this in your milk when having a lot of chronic constipation. And lastly, we have a very special slide here that shows you the rising sun. There's a wonderful Benjamin Franklin quote that early to bed, early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. So the science of Ayurveda explains why this is. It sounds nice, right? Oh, okay, great. I'll just sleep on time, become healthy, wealthy, and wise. Well, why is that? I always want to know why. So in Ayurveda, the sun element the sun is actually connected to the element of fire in the body. So this is a great example of what Sharanya has introduced about the connection in Ayurveda between the microcosm, which is our individual mind-body container, and the macrocosm, which is what's happening outside in nature. So in Ayurveda, we actually call digestion as a fire. So there's a digestive fire. And having a balanced, healthy digestive fire is considered the key to and the best reflection of overall health. So it's so important to the functioning of the body that the sun element can be considered a symbol of health. And we really regard it in Ayurveda as being a symbol of overall health. And the fire element within us gets activated when we wake up by 6 a.m. in the morning. It actually is amazing how many clients can overcome years of chronic constipation just by waking up early. There's been a lot of evidence of that we've found, and we're actually looking forward to doing some research to be able to look into this even more. The sun is a symbol of wealth and wisdom. Why is this? So in Ayurveda, we learn to really become students of nature. Nature has so many things to teach us if we're open to learning. And I know for me, the sun has actually been the most powerful teacher. So much of our mental stress in life comes from desires and expectations. Are my desires getting met? Am I having what I expect come to fruition? If not, I am not going to be happy with it. So I know for me, I used to really struggle with wanting approval, wanting it through my grades, wanting it through everyone liking me, wanting it through being popular, and, you know, just getting some kind of positive validation from other people to really prove that I'm worthy, you know, as a person. And I just lost my mind in it. My mind became like a really dark and scary place. I didn't like being in it. And the sun actually is like that light that dispels that darkness in the mind. And so when I lost my mind, then I also lost my health. I struggled with a lot of eating disorders when I was younger, and there's definitely a great mind-body connection between this particular health issue that no one could help me with. There's no doctor, there's no book, no online forum that could really address the root cause of this particular health challenge. But for me, Ayurveda has really brought me the answers to that. And I've learned so much along the way from the power of the sun. If you think about it, the sun just shines because that's the nature of the sun. It's not looking for approval. It doesn't need validation. It doesn't seek out people to tell it that it's great. It just shines because that's its nature. And the sun also doesn't discriminate. It doesn't say, I'm going to shine on this country, but I'm not going to shine on that one. I'm going to, shine for this person, but not for that one. It just shines regardless. And in this way, I've learned to actually look at my hands. The first thing when I wake up, I actually look at my hands and I try to really connect with that sun power within my own self as a way to destroy these inner demons, right? All the mind issues, the anger, anxiety, fear, and all of this. And to really say, make me like you. Make me that strong, that independent, that I don't need anyone, I don't need anything. But make me able to actually receive light and then be able to shed light for others. It's really incredible because in the ancient Ayurvedic text, the Charaka Samhita, along with the diet and lifestyle corrections, there's actually a recommendation there for selfless service as one of the ways to overcome physical and mental challenges. Can you imagine a prescription for compassion? But the rishis of Ayurveda knew this. They taught Ayurveda as a compassionate medicine, as a compassionate lifestyle, that we eat in a compassionate way, that we eat so that we can become that. And so, when I gaze at my hands when waking up early, I also ask that may my hands actually be infused with this inner power to be able to spread knowledge, to be able to spread hope and healing, and to know that, I'm supported along that journey. And I also have my own inner strength to be able to guide me. Because as we believe in Ayurveda, and as our experience definitely has been, we have the great potential and the power to really take health and our lives and destinies into our own hands. It's really important for me to do this every morning as soon as I wake up, because the first thought that we have actually defines the rest of our day. And there's a wonderful saying that you may or may not have heard of, or maybe you've heard it, but you didn't know the source of it. And it comes from one of the ancient texts of the Vedic traditions from which Ayurveda stems, that when you sow a thought, you reap an action. When you sow an action, you reap a habit. When you sow a habit, you reap a character. And when you sow a character, you reap a destiny. So literally, our destinies lie within our own hands. So now we have a couple of resources that we would like to share with you in case you're interested in learning anything more about what we've shared today. We have a book here called Prakriti. A lot of people ask, what's a book I can read about Ayurveda? So this is a nice one. And then if you've been inspired by any of these home remedies using kitchen spices or any self-care practices that you would like to know more about, there are some links here that you can visit to learn more. And we're also very happy to share that we will be teaching more about the concepts that were explored in this webinar, as well as many other real tools for living this compassionate, healthy lifestyle that Ayurveda gives us the tools for. It will be called Taking Health into Your Own Hands, and we encourage you to watch out for a class announcement. Whether or not you're a part of Stanford, I believe you're allowed to join it.
This will be a health improvement program class in an upcoming quarter.
Wonderful. So, and then we would love to hear from you, so please do not hesitate to reach out if there's any way that we can be of service. We would be so honored to help you. Do you want to just go back, Jerry, one slide?
Yeah.
So we can see our contact information here. We do one-on-one consultations. We also are open to teach, in a variety of places, along with what we're doing at Stanford. We also wanted to mention that there is a wonderful 2-month self-healing course happening at the school where we studied Ayurveda in Emeryville. It's also available via webinar if people want to learn more about Ayurveda and how to apply it to your day-to-day life. Those are some really great ways. So with that, I would love to first ask Sharanya if there's anything more you would like to share, and then do Q&A.
I think we can open for Q&A, but I would like to share just one little thought after Ananta talked about the self-care course coming up in our school, Vedika. So when I joined the school 5 years ago, one of the criteria for graduation was self-healing. So if you couldn't help yourself, there is no way you can help the community. And that to me was a very interesting criteria for a school's graduation, that if I can't work on myself, I am, not capable of doing anything. So it gives you that responsibility and taking health into your own hands to really say that, okay, if I can heal myself with whatever I have learned, so can you, because that's the power that you walk away with. So with that, we'll open the floor for questions. Mm-hmm. While Jerry is figuring out the whole control panel, we have actually a few common questions that we've been asked before. And maybe we can start with that, and that might actually help you with certain things.
Great.
So one of the common one is that, what do you think of the diets like vegan, raw food, other foods? And the answer to that question, and I'm not even sure if that might be a question for any of you, is that each diet is great in itself, but it doesn't apply to all. So one thing that I would like you to walk away with today is that one size does not fit all. I know I keep taking you back to that slide, and the whole intention was that you always have that image stuck in your head that all these diets of smoothies and anything that you're learning from internet, including from us, is all information and it's not knowledge. It becomes knowledge when you can really apply it to your life.
Okay, so now we're finally getting some questions.
Excellent.
Can we know more about what was found with your health?
I used to work at Stanford, and I was biochemistry major, so it was a research lab that I worked in. And in the microscope, I spent a lot of time in the microscope room to see life through those lenses. And it was amazing, seeing that light through those lenses and finding these amazing findings. But the moment I walked out of those rooms, I couldn't connect with my family and friends and translate into a simple paragraph as to what is it that I do and how am I making an impact in the world. And that question bothered me. I know it sounds a little esoteric, that how does it even matter? But it's interesting that, when I studied Ayurveda, one of the things that I found with it is that it's a democratized language where I don't have to, of course, I still have to go through, 5 years of intense education to translate something. But the simple things like connecting macrocosm and microcosm, I don't have to give you a whole scientific paper to understand what it means. I can translate that into my day-to-day life and give you a simple connotation of it.
There is a question here. What's the difference between space and air?
So space is something which contains all the other elements in it. So if you imagine it inside your body, space would become a container which holds everything. Air is which controls the movement. And it might sound a little intense. So even if we think of a room, so we are sitting in a room with Jerry. So the room alone is space. But without us in it, it's an empty space. But when we are here and speaking, that movement is what is doing the air within the space. So hope I didn't confuse you more, but you can imagine space as the container of all the 4 elements.
Do you need to add oil to turmeric for bioavailability? That was the rest of the question.
No,
by itself, it will do its magic.
And by the way, all these spices that Ananta shared, they are available even in organic form. You just have to look out for the right brand and find the right name. And sometimes the ajwain / bishop's weed is confused for celery seeds. So it's completely different from that. So that just to point that out.
Someone asked, why are there two elements that seem to always be linked together, air and space? What is the difference?
So I think Sharanya already addressed a little bit about that earlier, but they tend to be linked just because the air and space elements are so subtle that, the difference between them is a little bit, there is definitely a difference. Space is what is already there and everything will fill it, whereas air is what moves around and actually transports nutrients in the body to where they need to go. It moves the atmosphere. You can see it during hurricanes and, even when there's cyclones, it may be water that is moving around, but the thing that's moving it is air. So it may not be space that is necessarily doing that, but because the two are so intrinsically interrelated, it is more accurate to say, for example, that the deer would be having both the air and space elements within them.
Right, and they're not always interconnected. It's not that if we're using air, we always have to bring in space. But today, mostly for illustrations, because it didn't make sense to show you an empty room and call it space. But just for the illustration's sake, we combine the air and space with the deer just to, convey that to you.
Yes, and also just a caveat on some of the examples that we use. We typically don't recommend having red chilies or eating too much of popcorn in Ayurveda. They're not really considered Ayurvedic foods per se, but for the illustrative purposes, we wanted to use them to illustrate the points that we were trying to convey.
We will provide the slides. Somebody asked about that, and the recording of the webinar will be on the Health Improvement Program website. What kind of veggie help with what kind of veggie help with high sugar?
Mostly the ones with air and space qualities. I would say, bitter vegetables, more greens will help. If you're suffering with high sugar, yes, so more bitter vegetables. But depends. It won't just take that into factor. And it would see what other health conditions or what your medical history has been to say that do you just need the greens or do you need greens in combination with something to counteract all the different things that are happening. So that's actually really fascinating about this science, that it's the whole body. We won't separate sugar from whatever is happening in the rest of your body. We will take that into factor, plus your mind, plus your body, and everything else that's playing a role. So we'll bring all the neighbors within the ecosystem together to work on that whole system.
Yeah, and just to add to what Sharanya was saying, and also address the question about what happened with our own health and the story of our own transformations, for me, my mind was actually really wreaking havoc on my body. And the mind is actually a causative factor for a lot of diseases, just as much as any physical aspect, maybe like the food that you're eating or even the lifestyle that you're having. The mind itself, its state of balance or imbalance, can really, contribute to your health. And so once I started to really, practice Ayurveda in my diet and my lifestyle, then I automatically noticed a change in my mind by just living in this way that was really in harmony with nature. And, that in itself was the greatest medicine. So it actually wasn't any physical medicine that I needed so much as I needed everything to be in balance in order to really feel whole and complete. I had also struggled with a lot of insomnia, digestion challenges, and skin-related issues. And so a lot of the spices that we picked out today have been personally beneficial for all of these issues.
I see a question here. How do you know what type of body you have? So ideally, I would recommend really to come see a health practitioner. But the goal of today's talk was that, to have a connection with your own body, that mindfulness. So anytime you're eating, so this was the lunch hour. So if you haven't eaten your lunch already, when you're eating food, just notice what it does to you while you're eating, 15, 20 minutes after you've eaten, and an hour after you eaten during the digestion process. And it'll give you a sense of whether I was feeling heavy, I was feeling light, or I'm hungry again in the next 1.5 hours. And that will give you a sense of whether it was more of earth element or the air element, or if it was, if you feel nauseous at all. I mean, I don't want that for you, but in case. So that would be more of water element dominance. And so that would give you a little more clarity into what your constitution is as of now. So it changes from moment to moment. And that's clear.
Yeah, and based on the state of imbalance, actually your constitution is more important to look at, because a lot of people want to know what is prakriti, which is your constitution given at birth, but what's more important to the Ayurveda practitioners is what's your vikriti, which is what is out of balance, because we want to bring that back into balance.
Can you answer the question of what do you think about turmeric capsules?
In general, we, like I had mentioned in the teaching, like to have just the ideal quantity. So the turmeric capsules can be a lot of quantity of turmeric, maybe more than is actually beneficial to your body. And usually it's more of a medicinal substance. So you could order it online. Unfortunately, you can order a lot of Ayurvedic medicines online. But until you've actually been prescribed it by any medicine, by a practitioner who can really look at you holistically for everything that's going on with you, mind, your body, we have pages of intake forms, then only can you really safely benefit from these types of medications. It's actually extremely dangerous to just order a turmeric capsule or any other medicine for that matter, because you think it'll help you, and it may look like that because it may say it helps with whatever issue you have, but there are other factors to look at, and there are other factors which could actually prevent it from benefiting you in that specific way, or could set other aspects of your health out of balance. So that's why we definitely, like to focus on those things that you can proactively do to prevent disease, and then we encourage you to see someone if you're currently suffering with any kind of disease or discomfort. So we have a question here. You mentioned several herbs, but I would be curious, what category do they fall into? Space, air, fire, water, and earth? Well, that's a very interesting question. Now, given that a lot of the spices in Ayurveda are helping to stimulate the digestion, and I talked about the digestion being connected with one element in particular, what do you think it may be?
I think water.
Well, how about fire?
Oh, sure. Okay.
So it'd actually be the fire element, because the fire is what ignites the digestive system, and it brings heat to the body. So for example, if you're having a lot of dry foods or heavy foods or very oily things like even fish or chicken, we actually don't have a problem with it in Ayurveda. We would work with you where you're at, especially if there are foods you don't want to give up, and we would just ask you to add some of these digestive spices to the meat, chicken, seafood, anything, to make it more easily digestible, because the fire will help to break down the food into what will actually be absorbable by your body, and only what you can absorb can you really fully benefit from. So it's not just you are what you eat, but actually in Ayurveda we believe that you are what you digest, and unfortunately you are what you don't digest. So we want to really, absorb our nutrients well and benefit from them fully.
We have another question here that I have seen online. I have seen online questionnaires to determine your type. Are they valid? So those questionnaires are very interesting, and they're definitely valid for the moment. So when you're answering it, you would factor in whatever is going on right now, and based on that, some changes as of today. But they may or may not apply tomorrow or the after. So the way of handling those questions is really to look at it from a life perspective, that what have you been doing on a general basis for the last 6-7 months, and that gives you a much broader picture of how your health has been. So, and it can be a little tricky, but those are always fun to do, and you should totally check it out.
Yeah, the only precaution with the questionnaires is that you don't want to get stuck in it. What can be a little bit dangerous is that these days, if you read an article, it'll say, find out your constitution, and now, if you're this particular constitution, you can try this food and this lifestyle and this, herb to balance you out. But again, this is the kind of prescriptive, like self-prescription model that we wouldn't necessarily want to encourage, just because it can be a little bit overly simplistic. And a lot of times you'll have more than one constitution that are both equal in the body, or need to be addressed because they're in a state of imbalance, while your actual constitution may be something different. So, that it's something you can try it just for the fun of it, but I wouldn't recommend, diagnosing yourself with different things as a result of it.
So this one, there is an interesting question, and it's a little complicated one. Chinese five-element theory also contains wood and metal. Where do those elements fit in? What is the relationship between the Chinese and Indian five-element theory? And to that, I would just give a simplistic answer that based on our understanding of the history, Chinese medicine actually evolved from Ayurveda because this was one of the oldest medicine, and they added two more elements to it. And they are sort of interconnected in very subtle ways, but then again, they're complete different sciences and the approach is different. So we don't really mix the two because then you lose the purity. And when a Chinese medicine, they are doing their thing, it comes from a complete pure space. And the same thing applies to Ayurveda, that it's a different science and approach. We're all trying to approach the same thing about uniting the macrocosm and microcosm, but it's just that we approach it differently. I would just say one thing to this particular question where somebody has said, I've also been suffering and from these eating disorder, anxiety, depression in years and would like to attain the balance. That from based on today's workshop, if you just started to wake up early, like Ananta was telling you, whatever time you wake up, but waking up half an hour before that and eating only 3 meals a day, and you would see a difference within, a couple of weeks. And then you can go from there to find somebody to work with.
And we're happy to work with you. So if, for example, you're having this particular situation, you're more than welcome to contact either one of us. We have our emails listed here, and we'd be happy to help you to get to the root cause of what is going on,
Right. We couldn't keep their emails up on the screen any longer, but we can send them out to you by email, or they will be on the slides as well.
This is a very interesting question, and I was going to share this story, but then I didn't. Would turmeric pills be effective as the powder for inflammation? So 2 days back, I was in a rear-ended accident, and I was hit by 2 cars, where there was not much damage to my car, but there was a huge jerk, and so the whiplash effect didn't set in until 2 hours later, but I was driving to Emeryville and on 880, so I decided to reach my destination. So after reaching there, I started to feel discomfort in an hour or two. And what I did was the kitchen spice, because, of course we have to apply to ourselves before transferring the knowledge to you. So I had a glass of milk, 8 ounces, with a teaspoonful of turmeric. And believe it or not, it literally within the next 1.5 hours calmed down my effect. And the pain, which I was starting to experience in my upper back, it slowly started to subside, which doesn't mean that it replaces the medical help that I should have sought at that moment. But it means that suppose I have access to my kitchen and I have access to this, and the hospital is a little far away, then I can do this before I get there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What elements would be dairy products, such as yogurt, ice cream, cheese?
Yogurt, ice cream, and cheese are usually pretty slimy and sticky, and they are full of water. So they would be made of which elements do you think, Sherry? I gave you a big hint. Water and earth, actually. They're very grounding. Uh-huh. So in Ayurveda, we actually love to embrace dairy, but we do so in specific ways. So one thing we really recommend is whole milk. You can have that warm with your milk. So the nutmeg as recommended. It's important that it's warm, though. A lot of people come to us, and actually Sharanya had experienced being lactose intolerant before coming to Ayurveda because of drinking cold milk, but actually just having the milk warm changes the properties of the milk so that it can actually benefit you, and it helps to calm down, any anxiety because it calms the air and space elements through the grounding nature of the earth and water. So we love warm milk, and we also love something called ghee in Ayurveda, which is clarified butter, and that too, is made out of these elements, and it has a great benefit.
I know, Sharanya, you've been looking ahead do you see any other questions?
I do. So and I would let Ananta take this, in the example of sleeping better, the use of the nutmeg, how do you differentiate whether the warm milk versus the nutmeg was the help?
Well, that's a great question. And actually, say if you're having the constipation issue, right, which would be why you would not want to have nutmeg in that case, just having the warm milk with a little bit of turmeric, and you can add some sugar if, you can digest it. It will actually be helpful to you to sleep better at night, because when we're feeling like we're unable to sleep, it's usually a mind-related issue. There may be some anxiety, there may be something that we're thinking about a lot, like analyzing. I know I used to overthink things. Even now it sometimes happens, far less, but when it does happen, what we need is that grounding aspect of the earth and water, and because milk, as we just discussed, has that, it by itself will definitely have a great benefit. Nutmeg just gives you an additional benefit. And when we're feeling more calm and relaxed, we're more easily able to go to sleep. So, in a nutshell, they both will have the maximum benefit, but just by itself, the milk will definitely benefit you for insomnia challenges.
I think that was the last question, ladies.
Great.
Thank you so much for all your time, and we did have quite a few people stay online. So
thank you so much.
Thank you all for staying on the webinar. Again, we'll have the webinar recording and the slides on the HIP website within about 2 to 3 days, and look for the next webinar presented by these ladies in an upcoming quarter. Thank you again. We will close the webinar now.
Great. Thank you for receiving us and taking this. And this is truly a privilege to be back at Stanford today and, sharing this knowledge with this community.
Indeed. I just want to echo that sentiment. Thank you so much for coming and for your interest. We're really, so delighted and honored to be able to pass on just a little bit, like a tip of the iceberg of what we've benefited from. So thank you, Jerry. Thank you to Stanford. And thank you to all of you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, HIP.
Yeah, you bet, you bet. All right, thank you very much. We will end the recording now.